The small community of Elkview in West Virginia has seen its share of disaster in recent history. But in the winter of 2020, locals experienced a different kind of tragedy. That year, only weeks before Christmas, one quiet neighborhood would awake to the news of 4 murders, a family executed in their sleep, with no other signs of disturbance on the property. Weapons were left discarded in the house, and one family member was notably missing. Hi everyone, I'm Kevin, and this is Just Thought Lounge. JTL is the true crime channel that delivers serious, well-balanced coverage of the cases that really make you think. Today's case takes us to West Virginia, where a gruesome discovery by a family member one Sunday morning would rock a small community. The story of what had occurred unraveled slowly to the public. Law enforcement kept their information close to the chest, and even when the full story was revealed, there were still so many questions. Let's take a look. Pinch, West Virginia is a community near the Elk River on Pinch Creek in Kanawha County. The county is home to the state capital, Charleston, its largest city. But near to Pinch, the region is less metropolitan. Here, Daniel Long and his wife, Risa Saunders, lived with Risa's 2 sons, Gavin 16 and Gage 12. The couple were also parents to Jameson, 3 years old. On the 13th of December 2020, Risa's father, Timothy Saunders, had grown concerned that he had been unable to get in touch with his daughter. He had phoned the day before with no response. He tried again that morning, but no one picked up. He quickly grew concerned and drove out to check on the family. Timothy arrived at their home on Cemetery Hill Drive at about 10:30 a.m. that day. The neighborhood was, as usual, peaceful. When Timothy entered the house, he found that the front door was unlocked. The house inside was quiet, so Timothy began to look around. It was dark inside, no lights were on. Timothy made his way to the master bedroom. In that room, after reaching for the light, Timothy found his daughter, 39-year-old Risa May, and her husband, Daniel Long, both deceased. Gage was also discovered by his grandfather in the same room on the floor at the foot of the bed. Rushing from the house to a neighbor's, Timothy contacted 911 emergency. He said only that his family was dead from what appeared to be an act of violence. He had been unable to wake them, but had no other details for the operator. When the sheriff deputies arrived at the scene, they entered to find yet another victim. Young Jameson, who had met the same fate as his family members, was in his bedroom. But at that stage, not everyone had been accounted for. 16-year-old Gavin was not in the house, and he could not be reached.
About 10:40 this morning, we received a call from a family member that came to check on the family at this location. Upon the family member's arrival and the first responding deputies, we found 4 deceased people inside this residence. We're not really sure of the time frame as far as when the incident actually happened. We do know that a family member tried to get a hold of them yesterday, were unable to do so, and when they couldn't get a hold of them again this morning, that's when one of the family members came to check on them, and that's when they were found. We're in the process now of going through the residence, collecting evidence, and conducting the investigation. So right now it's very, very early, and we don't have a lot that we can really tell you right now. We're trying to get all that squared away and verified before we do anything as far as anything public.
Inside the house, the sheriff's department located both a handgun and a large knife. Autopsies and forensic analysis would confirm that all family members suffered a single shot to the head, fired at close range, probably within 1 foot. It was determined that the shooting happened several days prior to their discovery on the 13th, likely on the 9th of December. Very few details were released in the immediate aftermath of the discovery. In fact, it even took a few days to confirm publicly the identities of those found inside. The sheriff's office offered only that they believed that the neighborhood remained safe. This was an isolated incident. The family had been targeted for personal reasons.
I know the deputies that that were on the scene here and are still on the scene don't get that very many calls. It's a fairly quiet neighborhood.
This morning I just noticed a lot of traffic on the road, and then I got an alert on my phone, and being close to the scene, it's a little nerve-wracking because you don't expect it to be so close to home.
Locating 16-year-old Gavin to verify his safety was a high priority. Fortunately, Gavin was found quite quickly. Later on the same day that his family was discovered murdered in the home, Gavin was located in a house on River Road in Clendenin, roughly 30 minutes away from Cemetery Hill Drive. The house was owned by the grandmother of Gavin's girlfriend, Rebecca Walker. Though her grandmother at the time was traveling, she was not at home. When deputies entered the house, they found Gavin hiding behind a chest of drawers in the third-floor bedroom. Several articles of Gavin's clothing found near to him showed signs of what could be blood. Later testing confirmed that it was, and that it matched that of the teenager's two younger brothers. Gavin was brought in by the sheriff for questioning. Even at this early stage, the story was beginning to unfold. Facebook records between Gavin and Rebecca showed that they had been in contact on December 9th, the day that the murders were thought to have taken place. Gavin appeared to have been messaging, in part, while traveling from his home in Elkview near Pinch to Riverhaven Road in Clendenin. The correspondence between the young couple left little mystery as to who had committed the massacre on Cemetery Hill. In these messages, Gavin admitted to Rebecca that he had killed his youngest brother. While being questioned by detectives, Gavin went even further. He offered a full confession. Gavin later claimed, however, that he was unaware that this would lead to his arrest. Rebecca Walker, 17 years old, was also arrested in connection to the murders. Her correspondence with Gavin exposed her as being complicit and an accessory after the fact.
Detectives with Kanawha County Sheriff's Office made an additional arrest to the Elkview incident that occurred Sunday with the family. This is not like the typical case that we have where we have adults involved, and because they're juveniles and because we're restricted by code, and we certainly don't want to do anything that would cause a problem down the road with any possible prosecution on it. So we'll be more forthcoming, like we would be with adults being involved in it, but we just can't do that right now.
After a few hours of hiding in the woods, Gavin had traveled straight to Rebecca's house, where he had stayed, ostensibly in hiding for 4 days. Not only did Rebecca speak with Gavin immediately after the murders took place, but she failed to call the authorities or anyone else to report what she knew had occurred on Cemetery Hill. Worse still, phone records indicated that the young couple had been video calling each other not only after the murders, but while they were taking place. Gavin was indicted by a grand jury for 4 counts of first-degree murder. Due to the severity of the crimes, both cases, Rebecca's and Gavin's, were transferred to adult status in the court. Now, information was finally being released to the public, and the local media in West Virginia finally caught a look in court of the face of the young man who had admitted to killing his family. While Gavin was held on bond pending trial, Rebecca began to talk. In June of 2016, West Virginia and nearby parts of Virginia experienced one of the worst floods in the state's history. Over a period of approximately 12 hours, 8 to 10 inches of rain fell. It was the heaviest across 5 counties, including Kanawha County. In Clendenin, the Elk River surged from its banks and rose 5 feet deep downtown. Homes were flooded in Elkview. The rainfall produced widespread and destructive flash floods in the state. It proved to be amongst the deadliest ever recorded in the state as well. When the waters receded, 23 people were dead. Thousands of homes were damaged or destroyed. 12 counties were declared disaster areas. Rebecca Walker and her family were amongst those that lost most and close to all of their possessions in the flood. Living with very little in the years following, Rebecca was then grief-stricken by the death of her mother, with whom she had been extremely close. A doctor who examined the teenager wrote about how she had been a loner at school and had trouble with interpersonal relationships. This, coupled with her tragic background, had left her susceptible to her boyfriend's influence. Here, the possible motive for Gavin's horrid actions were introduced. Rebecca's attorney, Robbie Long, characterized the teen's relationship as the perfect storm.
Two of them became delusional about their futures together, and unfortunately, her boyfriend acted on that delusion, and that's what brings us here today. After that, Rebecca did, in fact, help hide him from authorities, and for that, she's here today to take responsibility.
They confided in one another, bonded with one another, and Gavin told her that he was being abused in his home, and he wanted to escape to be with her. Rebecca had wanted desperately to help him, but she also told the doctors that she did not know how to help him. Rebecca attempted to read a letter she had prepared, but was overwhelmed with emotion and was not able to read it aloud. It was instead submitted to the judge.
I've never read a letter like this before.
Your Honor, perhaps I could submit the letter to the court. I don't know if she's going to be able to read.
The prosecution introduced evidence that Rebecca had been aware of Gavin's intent to commit the murders up to a month before he acted. For Riza's father, Timothy, this fact alone was enough to warrant a life sentence.
Warnings, no calls were made, so now I have lost my family because of it. And they have lost their life because of no legal reason at all, and they do not deserve this to happen to them.
She pleaded guilty as an adult in July to 4 counts of accessory after the fact. In exchange for her plea, 4 counts of first-degree murder were dismissed. She received a sentence of 10 years for her role. Chief Deputy County Prosecutor Don Morris conceded that Rebecca received a deal because the state believed that Rebecca had been manipulated to some extent by her boyfriend. However, he did not accept the defense's characterization of the teenagers' relationship. He stated, "Instead of delusional, when you look at the conduct of both of the individuals involved, it's more of a selfishness than a delusion. It's wanting to spend time together at the expense of 4 lives." When Gavin went to trial in December 2022, the prosecutor would argue that the murders were motivated by selfishness.
Is a case excuse me, about a frustrated teenager who killed his family to be with a girl. As awful as that sounds to say, and as heartless as it feels to even say that, that's what this case is.
Gavin's attorney, John Sullivan, did not argue that the teenager didn't kill his family, but he did contend that the case did not rise to a first-degree murder conviction. He asked the jury to focus on malice, a necessary component of a first-degree murder charge. The defense said Gavin, who was homeschooled, was abused in the home and forced to be the primary caretaker of his 3-year-old brother. This was so firmly established that the boy began calling Gavin Dad.
And you'll find out that it got to the point where they put a padlock on the back door from the inside of the house. It was a regular lock that you could, anybody's door, you can open it from the inside to get out and lock on the outside. They put a padlock on the back door of the house. You learn about the different ways that Gavin felt trapped in this house.
This is the story of a teenager who was abused by his stepfather, forbidden to leave the house, and not able to access food in the home. Sullivan told the jury about how food was being locked up in the refrigerator and pantry, and offered photos from the crime scene that showed padlocks on the refrigerator and cabinets to demonstrate this point. In addition, they introduced evidence that Gavin had attempted repeatedly to run away from home to escape the situation. Text messages to Rebecca showed Gavin growing progressively more angry at the sheriff's department for locating him and returning him home.
Originally, contacted them. There was an extensive history there for the amount of runaways and guarding the particular individual. At that point, it was necessary to contact Child Protective Services because of that. But when I had spoken with Gavin at Buster's residence, he basically had just stated that he was, I guess, overwhelmed because he was being homeschooled and he wanted to go to school, but he had a responsibility to take care of Jameson, a 2-year-old, and that he basically fed him, clothed him, etc. He had also made a remark regarding some locks on some cabinets and doors and refrigerators.
When Timothy Saunders took the stand, he told the jury that the food was sometimes locked up because the boys had been known to eat excessively and the family was trying to make what food they had last through the month. Timothy also recounted the heartbreaking moment when he entered his daughter's home to check on the family and found them in the bedroom.
And the light was off and they had darkening curtains. So I just seen them laying in the bed, so I was hollering for them.
Did anybody answer?
No.
Did you go in the bedroom?
Started to. And I bumped into something, so I found the light, turned the light on before I walked in. No, thank you.
At that point, did you figure out what you'd bumped into?
He said he had to turn the light on.
And what was there?
Gauge.
Rebecca Walker was the state's fourth and perhaps most crucial witness.
Rebecca, is it hard for you to be here today?
Yes, it is.
When she took the stand against her former boyfriend, jurors learned that Gavin's mother and stepfather had not approved of their relationship. They had forbidden Gavin from continuing to see Rebecca, but the two had continued their relationship in secret through text messages and video chat.
He was having a rough time at home, and he didn't like being told what to do. He didn't like being told, what he could and couldn't do. And that what was including me and him getting to spend time together, which is what me and him both wanted. And that was the reason basically why this happened.
Rebecca testified that in December 2020, her grandmother, whose house she was living in at the time, was going out of town, and it gave her and Gavin the opportunity to be together. She spoke of Gavin's anger over his failed attempts to run away from his family. When asked if Gavin talked about doing anything as a result of that anger, she said he talked about wanting to kill his family. She said she also agreed that this was a way for them to be together. On the evening of December 9th, Gavin and Rebecca were on a video call. Gavin was at home. He had a gun and a knife.
I say that I was not at his house at this time. I was on video chat with him while this was occurring. But I did encourage him by telling him to hurry up and do it.
Did you say to hurry up and do it?
I believe so, yes.
Why did you want him to do that?
Because I felt like that if he did it, then it would give me and him the opportunity to be together.
At some point during the video call, from Rebecca's end, the screen went black.
Did you see the gun on the camera?
Yes.
And who had the gun in their hand?
Gavin did.
Did he also have a knife?
Yes.
Did Mr. Smith tell you what he was planning on doing with the gun and the knife?
He was planning with the gun. He was planning to kill his mom and his stepdad. But however, I can't exactly recall what was used with every single victim, but I do know that there was a gun and a knife involved with the victims.
I could not see what he did because the screen was pitch black, Rebecca said. Rebecca did not witness the murders, but she knew when they took place. She testified that when he came back on, he seemed very panicked, nervous, and scared. I was trying to calm him down and tell him it was going to be okay. The central point of contention at Gavin Smith's trial was the question of malice and whether he was guilty of first-degree murder. This was the focus of both the defense and prosecution's closing arguments.
Gavin shot his family. He killed all four of the people in his household. And so the question is only of intent, whether he acted with malice and deliberation, whether he was truly the wicked, depraved, and malignant spirit that is described in the legal instructions. And it would be easy enough to just write off this terrible thing, to write him off as a wicked, malignant, depraved spirit, and say that's what we're saying, and that's what the conviction is going to be based on. But don't just write it off. Don't just write him off.
We're going to talk about malice, ladies and gentlemen, jury. Well, Mr. Sullivan only gave you half the definition of malice. The court told you, and you're going to get a copy of the instructions, that malice is a cruel act towards another. I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, jury, that is a cruel act. They were all committed with a firearm. The judges have instructed you can infer malice from the use of a firearm under circumstances that did not justify it. And ladies and gentlemen, jury, I submit the circumstances in this case did not justify it.
The trial lasted only 4 days, 3 to present witnesses and 1 for jury deliberations. Gavin Smith never took the stand in his own defense. The defense team relied on the testimony from the sheriff's department relating to his attempted escapes and the photos of the padlocks in the house as proof that he was being held against his will.
The jury found the defendant, Gavin Blaine Smith, guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of murder in the first degree as contained in count 2 of the indictment.
And you just heard Gavin Smith has been found guilty on 3 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of second-degree murder.
Jury foreperson Stephen Hayward later told the local media that the jury deliberated extensively on questions pertaining to the application of first-degree murder in the death of 12-year-old Gage. That he was found in his parents' room where he was not meant to be suggested to them that there was a reasonable doubt that Gavin had intended him as a target. They applied the lesser charge of second-degree murder for that reason. Young Jamison had been found in his room. The jury viewed that his murder was premeditated.
There was a heaviness and a gravity, like the gravity of the situation was not lost on anyone that was sitting in that courtroom. Because we were dealing with, one, the lives of four people that were the lives were taken, but also we have essentially a 16-year-old boy that took the lives of his family. And trying to really figure out what would make someone do that is always, it's not an easy thing to even try to wrap your head around on a good day.
Gavin will be eligible for parole in 15 years. A juvenile cannot be sentenced to life in prison without a chance of parole in West Virginia, despite being tried as an adult. He faces multiple life sentences. It is unlikely that parole would be issued in only 15 years. At the time of publishing, we know only that Gavin's sentence will be handed down at a later date. And that was the tragic case of Gavin Smith and Rebecca Walker. Thanks for watching. I'm Kevin. This is Just Thought Lounge, and I'll see you in the next one.